Well, hi friends, this is Jeff Hopper with Lynx Players President Jeffrey Cranford. Hello. And we are here beginning what is the 5th study in the Spiritual Due Diligence series, Jeff. And this one has to do with death and life after death. A pretty powerful topic for sure.
That's a question many have asked.
Right. And we're on the first lesson, and the first lesson has to do with the fact that there are various views of death. There is, the view that, well, we just die and we're put in the ground and it's done. Physically, that's all we have. There's obviously the view that there's an eternal life or maybe an eternal judgment to go forward into. There's the concept of reincarnation. There are intermediate sort of concepts that you run into, say, in an understanding of a purgatory, perhaps. Right. And so you have all of these views, and there's a logical problem there because they can't all be right. We're going to discover at some point that one of these particular things prevails.
Or some would suggest we'll never discover whether that's true or not because we will be gone.
Right, exactly. But this kind of invites a question that applies here and elsewhere. What do we do when there are conflicting truths, so to speak, out there?
Well, it's the place that we live, and today probably the most highly trumpeted, certainly in the West, that most highly trumpeted view would be that once our synapses in our brain stop firing and there's no heartbeat, that you are extinct, so that you were there for a moment and gone. The separation comes with consciousness and energy. So energy never dissipates. I mean, physicists will tell us that. Energy it can take different forms, it can go, but it never goes away. Energy is always in the universe. There's this constant kind of energy, and it may go from one form to another, but it never. The point really is consciousness. Does consciousness continue on? And there's been some great things written recently, in my view, by Dinesh D'Souza, and some things about afterlife. I think he has a book actually called Afterlife, and some very provocative things to promote. Now, obviously, the question, what is when you get different views? Well, as you said, only one ultimately can be right. And so with that conflict comes really the battle of the ages. What happens when we die? I mean, every human being is going to ask the question, what happens when we die? And so when we look to experts to say, well, it's clear, science proves that nothing happens after life, after death, pardon me, then that's an absurd claim. I mean, it's a little bit like the cosmonauts when they first escaped out of our atmosphere, those Russian cosmonauts, and they went out and they got just beyond the kind of the grip of gravity of the Earth, and they kind of got into the free fall, and they looked up, and their first comments, one of the first comments back was, "We're out here and there is no God." I mean, of course, that was an absurd comment. Of course, there are some logical questions that come up with that. Well, where is God? How, is he outside of time and space, and how all that works? But at some point, we have to deal with the question, what happens after we're gone, or we are no longer conscious? And the one that you didn't allude to that's certainly very pervasive as well is everybody just kind of is absorbed back into one great consciousness of oneness and unity. And it sounds enticing, but that's not enticing to me at all, and it's certainly not enticing to me to change my life now for the future. I think one of the things, Jeff, that people get so concerned about is that they feel like that religion and practitioners of religion are abusing this idea that there must be life after death, and so you have to follow me. It's like a power grab. Well, that may be the case, and there have been power grabs in religion for many years. Absolutely. But it still doesn't allow us to elude the question, what happens when everything shuts down here and they put me in the morgue or they put me in the ground? Is there a continuation of consciousness? And if you're not asking that question, everybody asks that question. I don't care at what stage in your life. There are times when you are resting in bed at night and you look up and say, I wonder what's after this. And so we have to buy into something. And the outworking of that is dramatic. And so if you choose oneness, you say, well, I'm just an animal and I'm here and gone, you're going to live a life very differently than someone who says, no, I take Jesus' example and what Jesus said about reality and his claim, and the claim that he was resurrected from the dead, that opens the doors for all of us for afterlife, at least according to the biblical perception. I'm going to live accordingly, recognizing that there's a judgment. And Paul talks about that very often. There will be a day where we will stand before the judgment seat of Christ, or the great white throne judgment, depending on your views. and we will stand and give an account for the life that we've lived. The Bible's very complete about that. So that life is going to look radically different than one that says, I'm just chaotic chance, I'm going nowhere, I'll either cease to exist or I'll be absorbed back into the great oneness of energy and nothing's there. The outcome, the ramifications are dramatic.
Well, they are dramatic and they are fascinating and captivate people's interest. For all those who say it's just a hole in the ground and that's it when we're done, for those who say we're going into this oneness of consciousness, fine, but there's that great popular interest as well for books like Heaven is So Real and these things. People are fascinated by this question, so I look forward to the conversations we're going to be able to have about this topic.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.